you hear a lot of people concerned about social media hijacking our minds. I think that's a real concern, and certainly, I've had my own mental health issues, and I've found that getting away from computers and social media has been one of the surest, quickest fixes to your average mental health problem. But in terms of how much we should actually worry about social media, say the idea is combine social media with quantum computing and man, it's going to be irresistible. But going back to the evolutionary constraints and what we have the capacity for, and then the environment interacting with that and epigenetic effects and everything else, isn't there limiters on dopamine and endorphin? As someone who I'm quite interested and fond of just drugs generally, I think that artificially stimulating the mind is something that is so curious. We've been doing it for a long time through many means, chemically or just through experience or whatever else. And I think social media can be a drug in a way, in our phones and screen time and everything else. But isn't there, in my experience of even doing like hard street drugs or whatever before, there is a limit. There's not a limit to like a necessary addiction or suffering but there's only so much, unless you're taking pills or something that are somehow increasing serotonin and dopamine and endorphins or whatever. There's only so much that you have. So what, I mean, so I guess what I'm saying is I push back on the idea that we're just going to be these helpless zombies we're going to put on the perfect virtual reality helmet and then we're going to be sucked into the matrix and there's no way out of it. It just doesn't seem like our neurochemistry can possibly get us that much more addicted on something than what we've already been. We found plenty of things to get addicted to before. And it also seems that it seems that it's not like humans have gotten more addicted to things through our modern. It seems like there's always an explosion of some new drug or some new thing, and we kind of don't know how to handle it. And then we do adapt a little bit over time, and we do become more mindful. Our modern culture is so focused on wellness and meditation and all these things that in the 80s, for a kid in Wisconsin, the idea of doing yoga or something like that would have seemed absolutely asinine, and organic food or any of that stuff would have seemed so silly. And now in an era where if the premise is that things are just going to keep on getting more addictive and worse in that way, it doesn't seem to be following suit in a lot of ways. It seems like people are also at the same time becoming a lot more mindful.
I've never really thought about the opposition between sort of the addictive nature of social media and mindfulness being the antidote to that, although it's a good point and it's worth, I'll have to think about that a bit. But I guess you got to think a little bit about who's competing with whom. So, we're not in this situation here where social media may or may not be, but probably is causing, substantial social problems. I think that the case that that young people are spending so much more time on social media and so much less time on offline relationships, and that's having consequences for the way that they socialize and for mood disorders, I think is a reasonably solid case. I wouldn't say it's open and shut, but I'd say that the evidence is very much in that favor. But that's probably the consequences of that are probably because it's cutting into, interactions with family, interactions with people who will say no to you and who will give you some of the tough love that you need, as well as sleep. It's cutting into sleep. So, we're not in that situation because somebody designed something to try and cut into our sleep or cut into our relationships or something. It's just somebody wanted to rate, the girls on campus by their faces and found that, lots of other people wanted to do something similar, and then they found other uses for it, and then they found a way to monetize it, So I'm always worried when there's this discussions about technology, about we must design the technology now so that it doesn't cause harms. We must design the sex robots so that they have fail-safes and that nobody uses it to simulate, coercing somebody into sex, etc. That's a reasonable point to make. But, most of the harms that result from technologies, whether it's cigarettes or lead in your petrol and your pipes or whatever, those harms don't come about because of design features. That kind of bugs.
This is such an important point. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that what we are in at the moment, what people, particularly social media users, but generally users of technology are in at the moment, is we're kind of the fodder in a competition between various different platforms for our very limited attention. And with our limited attention is our limited serotonin and dopamine responses to whatever stimulus is available to us. And the sort of big fear with machine learning getting better and better at figuring out ways to keep us on platform and to keep us engaged is that the competition between different platforms and different providers and different advertisers, etc., is making the products better and better and better at holding our attention and at overcoming whatever our strategies are. We do have strategies. I write a book about it. You talk about it on your podcast. We become a little bit more aware that we shouldn't wake up first thing in the morning and spend half an hour scrolling through our social media. We should rather get up and go for a walk, and that's our response in the arms race. Mm-hmm. But it's not you and me against the technology company. We're against all of the technology companies.
I'm so happy to hear you say that, because I think what really gets neglected, like I said in the beginning of the show, is that, this isn't to pass judgment on which is more correct objectively between sociology and evolutionary thinking. But I do believe that emergent properties of complex systems are something that are really difficult to detect and are underrepresented and understood within the average person. And I include myself within the average person. But because I think many of those you talk about Yuval Noah Harari earlier, and kind of the idea that potentially what set us apart was this ability that we evolved to cooperate around these larger ideas and these fictions. And when we say the word fiction, it's not as a judgment either. Subjective realities are very important, but the top-down thinking that I think comes naturally to humans leads to a lot of other problems in our modern culture, a lot of conspiracy thinking, for example, and a lot of it's. There wouldn't be anything wrong with conspiracy thinking if there's a little more utility in it, but there's just not a lot of accuracy in the aim. It's Much in the way that I grew up hearing about the devil having this judgment and do this or that, or the devil will get you. It seems like a lot of the same thinking is applied to like this Bill Gates or this, like, for example, I don't like Elon Musk. I'm not a huge fan of him, but also to be like, Elon Musk is ruining this or that. These kind of, it's like building another sort of deity that has just a slightly more tangible quality because they are humans and you can imagine doing something to stop them or whatever. But it seems to have the same sort of top-down misunderstanding and underappreciation of emergent emergent properties. Like you said, no one designed your water pipe to be rusty. It came along with it. Maybe they were lazy about fixing it. Maybe they covered up how defective it was, for sure. But no one designed that pipe to be that way. Like, that's not really a thing that happens so much. And so I really appreciated that point. Sorry for the rant. But
no, you're 100% right. You know, we evolved to deal with human actors. And to deal with the natural environment and the like. But, you know, what's the first thing we did? We personified aspects of the natural environment and put gods in charge of them because we're used to dealing with people and going to somebody and saying, hey, you need to sort this thing out. This is in your wheelhouse. And then when we realize that there's this massive global entity that pulls in as much money as, you know, a medium-sized country, and that there's a person who's identifiable as the CEO or the inventor of that technology, whatever it is, we think that immediately that entire company is designed to assert that individual's will upon the population. And, you know, we did this, we're still doing it with Rupert Murdoch. You know, maybe Rupert Murdoch is that guy, but, you know, certainly 20 years ago, it was all about we've got George W. Bush in the White House because Rupert Murdoch wanted him there. And to some extent, that's true. But, you know, Rupert Murdoch only cast one vote. And, yeah, his newspaper said certain things, etc. But News Corp and Fox are, you know, probably as close to a top-down control situation as possible. And yet at the same time, they're not just reflecting what the guy at the top thinks, because we can all reject that. They're also reflecting back to us what we think and what our fears are. They're
very ratings based.
Yes, exactly.
It's are they controlling or are they pandering?
Exactly.
And my guess is they're doing a whole lot of pandering, a lot of it, because that's profitable. There's a lot of money in doing that.
People want to hear what they want to hear. You know, they want to hear their own views reflected back to them in a slightly more erudite way that makes them feel slightly more erudite and incredibly validated. What do people want? They don't want nice. They want to be validated.